We're good to move on, I think.
Yep.
Okay, so look, thanks for taking the time to join us for the webinar. The purpose is to give you, as Barb said, the general information to help you be more successful in your application. What it will actually do is make it harder for the panel to make the selections. The way that the process works is applications are received by TeachNZ and are then assessed by a panel. For primary awards, the panel consists of members from New Zealand School Trustees Association, Ministry of Education, and an NZI Te Reo member. Each application is assessed and given a score. The higher the score you get, the more likely you are to be successful.
Getting a sabbatical or study leave is a big deal. It is a significant investment by the Ministry of Education into your professional learning and development. Every year, there are far more people applying for these awards than what are available. Remember, you will not be given a study award or a sabbatical based on the number of years you've taught, how hard you work, or how many times you have applied. It is all based on the application that the panel sees. So you need to make sure that you spend time on your application and complete it to a high standard. It will take a certain amount of work prior to applying in order to be able to put together a good application. TeachNZ, which is the arm of the ministry that looks after study awards and scholarships, has produced guides for each application type. I'm going to do what I do with this is important. Please make sure you read the guide before you start writing the application. It is not meant to be a mysterious process. They tell you what you need to know in that guide.
Yeah, and to follow up on that, TeachNZ are very thorough in supporting applicants in that space, probably more thorough than they necessarily need to be. So this year is the first year that you need to have an education sector login, commonly known as an ESL, to access the study awards and the sabbatical application forms. If you don't have one already, you'll need to get one ASAP. If you're not sure who at your school is responsible for this, check in with your principal or with the office manager.
One thing that we have seen over the years that trips people up is that they use the wrong form. Now that all the applications are online, this should be less of an issue. However, you do need to know what you need to apply for. Sabbaticals give you 10 weeks of paid leave to do a research project and to refresh yourself. Principals may also be able to get some support from their school board to undertake some of the work that they want to do as part of the sabbatical. However, getting an award as a principal does not automatically entitle you to board funds. That is a separate process. A study award gives you up to 40 weeks paid leave, including all the units and so forth that you're entitled to. The length of the award depends on the number of papers and credits or points that you're doing. You need to decide what you want the time for and then apply for the correct form on the correct form for the appropriate award. You won't be considered if your application is on the incorrect form, and that includes if you're a principal applying on a primary teacher sabbatical form, an area school teacher applying on a primary teacher's form, and so forth. It's got to be the correct form. Double, triple check, get someone to look at it for you.
It's also really important to ensure that everything is spelled correctly. Remember, you're putting these in front of teachers and principals, especially words in Te Reo Māori, including macrons. Everything also needs to make sense grammatically. Before you submit your application, it's really good idea to share it with a trusted colleague and have them check for spelling and grammatical errors and give you your general feedback. My wife used to check mine. Also, make sure the language you use is current. For example, make sure you refer to the presiding member of the board rather than the board chair. Remember, this is a professional application and needs to present itself that way.
A plea on behalf of the panel. Please pay attention to the word limit. If it's 250 words, don't just give the panel a sentence. On the other end of the continuum, don't give us 10 pages. The rule of thumb is plus or minus 10%. So you don't have to stop at word 249 and say, but there's just a little bit more. But you do need to be conscious that if they're saying 250 words, that's about how much that you should be doing. With applications being online now, it should be harder to write too much, but be aware your words need to count to add value to your application.
Absolutely. And another thing that seems to trip people up every year is the section on isolation. People spend a long time convincing the panel they're not isolated in any way. And actually, if you are isolated, professionally or geographically, this will increase your overall score and thereby enhancing your chances of either getting a sabbatical or study award.
Do be careful about attaching what you might think is supporting documentation. References from the school board, from your principal or anyone else, do not boost your chances of success. Only attach what has been asked for. You will need to provide evidence that you have support of your employer. Please send either the form that's in the application or just the section of the minutes that contains the motion to support your application, where it is noted you've been given school board support. School board minutes, and we have received pages and pages, like whole minutes from 2-hour-long meetings. And they often contain confidential information that should not be shared with the panel. Get support from your principal and your school board as soon as possible. You don't want to miss out on an award because TeachNZ does not have evidence of that support.
For sabbaticals, just make sure you're clear about who you're going to share your findings with. There's a raft of places you can do that. So the more people you can share with, the better. The minimum expectation is obviously you'll share your sabbatical with your principal, your board, and TeachNZ. Do include them. Don't take it for granted that we think they're in there. Also think about how you could share with your staff and then wider. So does your kahui ako have PLD sessions? Do you belong to a principal group or a Senko network or a PLG group? Would you be able to run a PLD session at your branch, Aranui Tomo or Komiti Pacifica? All of those areas are possible options for you to share because that concept is another strength in the application. So there's do's and don'ts. Do's and don'ts. Here's some of them to think about. Do check the guide for the ministry priorities, because if you Google search it on the ministry's website, they're not necessarily going to align with the ones that are in the award. I don't know why, but that's always been the case. Do write in the correct section. So when you're filling in this piece, make sure it's the piece that's supposed to go in there. And also send what's asked for. Everything else is simply taking up a panel member's time. So CVs, academic records, academic transcripts, letters of support from Tom, Dick, and Harry, don't bother.
Correct. I'll just remind people the Q&A function is there for you if our presentation so far has raised anything that you need clarified or more information on. So here's some don'ts. Don't repeat information. The panel only needs to read it once. Don't send course manuals for your study leave. These are not helpful. Don't send zip files, as the information is often in other parts of your application, and they can be difficult to open and or read. And don't use screenshots unless you absolutely have to. Do ensure that the information that you want to capture is captured, however.
Yes, often screenshots cut out the edges and you miss important pieces of information. So there's a lot of information in there for you to think about. We're now going to go to the questions that you've been putting in the Q&A or have possibly provided previously. I can see one in the Q&A, Barb.
Oh, this is, can I talk to this? Because this is my absolute, yes. So this, I would like to know more about the isolation section of the form. I work in a medium-sized country school and I'm trying to find a way in which to consider myself isolated. Do you have some advice? Yes, I do. The further you are from a main center, the harder it is, the more isolated you are from the opportunities to visit other schools, to talk to other teachers outside your area, to access professional development face-to-face. And we know that Zoom is a marvelous thing because here we are, but there is no substitute for meeting with people who are doing something you're interested in face-to-face. So if you can say, for example, I am sitting in Pleasant Point. I'm an hour and 45 minutes to 2 hours from Christchurch and 3 hours from Dunedin. If I want to interact with anybody in those areas to see what they're doing, I am physically isolated from them. You may also, in a semi-rural school, be the only one teaching year 7 and 8. You may be the only Senko within CUI of your school. You may be the only one who at your school who's got any Te Reo Māori or a Pacifica language. Anything where you would have to travel a significant distance to, that makes it hard for you to access other people to interact with, that's your isolation. I hope that helps.
Yeah. I don't know the answer to the next one that reads, you mentioned with regards to sabbaticals that units are still paid. Is this, and I'm assuming FT is, or can either be full-time or fixed term, I guess it's fixed term units that you have held for a number of years too, or just permanent units? It must be fixed term. I don't know the answer, Barb.
My understanding, and I stand to be corrected, is if you were to get a sabbatical for next year and still held that fixed term unit, it would be paid for the length of the sabbatical. However, that doesn't stop your principal from saying, well, since you're going on sabbatical next year, we're going to give that fixed term to someone else. But your permanent units are yours and you would be paid for them.
Next one's another units one too.
I have 2 units. If I'm granted the award, the principal has advised I would lose 1 unit. Is this fair? The number you need there is 0800 NZEI help. You might know the numbers off the top of your head. It's 693-443 maybe. We might be able to pop that in the chat. So if you've been granted those units, being away for a term or a year should not mean that you don't get them, because the school is being reimbursed for them while you're away. Can you get a copy of the questions prior to entering the online document? When I contacted TeachNZ, they said to search for an old form. I would like time to prepare. Right. Don't know the answer to that one. Sorry, anonymous attendee. I would go Google TeachNZ sabbatical application or study leave application and see if you can find an old one kicking around on the internet. I can't imagine it wouldn't be around.
You get really stuck on that one there, trying to find one. You can always flick me an email through the 0508 and I can support you with that. But have a hunt first and then use me as a last resort. I'm sure I can dig one out from somewhere.
Thanks, Rikki. Right, does the 5-year clause come into play from the beginning of a previous sabbatical or the end? So go ahead, Rikki.
Okay, so that's from the time it was granted. So there are some very astute mathematicians in the education field who know that when they apply, their 5 years just happens to tick over for when the next one they do.
Yeah. If it was a tight situation and you had one 5 years ago and there are other people who had the same points as you, we might say, oh, they could wait another year, but unlikely. You are just as entitled to anybody else once you've had 5 years between. Oh, and somehow need to refresh here, I think.
The next one's a staffing issue, or a staffing query around LSCs, learning support coordinators. So it's for those people covered by the collective. So if they're in that collective, they're most entitled to that, and the school would get the same staffing support as they would for a classroom teacher. The challenge, of course, is who's going to replace the LSC.
Right. So one of 3 teachers teaching year 5, 6, our schools within distance is not an issue. I would say that if you are the only one in your school who's agreed to take on student teachers in recent years, and your sabbatical project had to do with something to do with student teachers, whether it was what the best way to mentor them is. I think if your sabbatical project was about teaching maths, it's harder to argue isolation for that. But I think if you are interested in exploring working with beginning teachers or student teachers as part of your sabbatical project, being the only teacher in your school or in the area that's prepared to take on a student would be an isolation factor you could consider. Does being a member of NZI increase chances of being awarded? Well, you get to come to this webinar, so maybe, but in but in terms of the sabbatical, we don't know whether you're a member or not. Any option? Oh, this might be you, Rikki. Any other options for scholarships covers fees rather than a sabbatical? No, the study leave is your time.
Yeah. Yeah.
So both of them just basically ensure that you continue to get paid while you do your study or while you do your sabbatical. Oh, yeah. On the online form, it asks for an upload for the answers. Is that a separate doc for each response? It can be, but it's kind of nice when it's not. Either, it's fine. I can see that Curran is putting some possible ideas in the chat, which you can no longer see, so I'll just have a look. Options for scholarship, the David Scholarship Memorial Scholarship, or Grant for Good might cover fees. So there's a couple options there if you need more covered than just your salary while you're studying.
I can do the next two, Barb. So will it impact on my application if I send the board minutes in after the due date? Not necessarily. We like people to have put them in as soon as they possibly can, but obviously many boards only meet twice a term and it's one side of the cutoff or the other. If you make a note in the minutes in your application, that the information is coming, then that TeachNZ have a little reminder model for themselves to make sure that it does come in. And we check that as at the panel. I say the panel checks that before they start scoring and assessing applications.
Right. Catherine, are you saying that I think your question was about the isolation and the preparing for being the only one prepared to have a student teacher, and you're wanting to apply for a TeachNZ study award to do my master's. I'm not sure that that's going to be isolation at that point, Rikki, again, unless your master's is on mentoring student teachers.
Yeah, it depends on the papers you take, I would think.
Yep. Yep. So a step-by-step explanation on where to find forms on this education sector login. Contacting TeachNZ would be your best option for that, or talk to whoever in your school is in charge of your education sector login.
And so the next one, do most principals support these applications? Yes, they do. As far as I'm aware, I cannot recall in discussions I've had with principals where one said, no, I can't support that, because they know it's part of the collective and there's an expectation that it's in the collective, therefore you will be supportive. Sometimes they can't support that because they can't replace you. The staffing issues, obviously, that they should talk to you about what that looks like. Yeah.
Right.
And for our area schools, it's obviously a lot more difficult in that space.
Yeah. So Rikki, Catherine, who's wanting to do her master's, wants to know how much weight the isolation fact has in the application and if there's a greater chance for winning a part-time study award or a full-time.
So from previous experience, about 2/3 of people at least who apply for, and this is my numbers, not official numbers, who apply for study awards get them. So it's done on the number of weeks. So you don't apply for part-time or full-time, you apply for whatever number of weeks you need. And then there's a calculation that works out the scores are, the applications are assessed, the scores are ranked, and then there's normally a bunch in the middle that are sitting there or thereabouts that go past the number of allocated weeks. So there's no greater chance of either one. It's simply on the number of weeks. Yeah, I think your issue will be that you'll need to go to whoever administers your ESL logins, and they'll need to click the part in your own particular page that allows you to see the study, the panel, sorry, the awards.
Yeah, and you also use it, you actually use it to log into the TeachNZ website rather than just to ESL. So try that, and if you can't, if that doesn't work, then get in touch with TeachNZ and explain to them what's going on. I'm having a little trouble every time I scroll to the bottom. I get one question and then it flicks back up to me.
So should I send my principal's endorsement myself or ask my principal too? Probably easier if the principal's signing it off and you're there, great. It doesn't matter so long as it all ends up at TeachNZ by the due date, wherever possible.
Fantastic, absolutely. For sharing the findings to professional network or a conference, but there's nothing confirmed, is it worth putting the intention without confirmation? Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
It's a bit like the papers that you're wanting to do next year. None of that stuff's settled yet. So you have to say, this is my plan. And we all know that plans are just plans.
Yeah, and I know, for example, you know, you might, as part of your sabbatical, think, right, these are the books I want to read or the articles I want to read, and these are the schools I want to visit. And you've told us that. And then later on, you find a book that's better or a school that would be a better one to visit. That's fine. So if you think, yes, it's a good opportunity that I would be able to share this work at the conference or at an area council meeting, you don't have to have a date time booked in for that.
Yeah. If your plans do change, you need to let TeachNZ know.
Yeah.
Because that, you know, they're accountable in some way around, you've said I'll do this, or I've said I'll do this, and now I'm going to do that. Just keep them in the loop.
Yeah. But if it is, I'm going to visit this school instead of that school.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah.
But if it's, I was going to do a master's in counseling and now I'm going to do a master's in something else, yes, that would matter.
Right.
Was there anything in the questions that came through in the registrations that we haven't already addressed?
There's one. It's an interesting one, Catherine. I think there's a statement in the application, or there was previously from memory, that it is about completing a qualification. So if you're doing a PhD, for instance, can't be completed in a year. So, and I was doing a master's and I can complete the second year of my master's in that time, I would score more highly than you. Hope that makes sense.
Yeah. If the BOT and principal approved my application for a TeachNZ study award last year, but I did not apply to it for personal reasons, do I need to get an updated letter from my principal and board? Yes, you do. So with unit entitlements, as I said, if you've got permanent units, that is part of your salary. It will be paid while you're on leave. If you've got a fixed term unit this year, and your principal knows that you are going on sabbatical, they may or may not choose to give you that fixed term one next year. But if you do have a fixed term for the year that you are in the sabbatical, you would be covered for that.
To the LSCs, it's your employing principal, because it's from your employer.
Can relievers apply? If they have a full practicing certificate,
Yeah.
then they're eligible. That would be category 1.
Jane, in terms of course fees being covered for a study award, that comes down to a discussion between the applicant and the principal. There's no money that can be used out of this space. That's a school decision.
Right. So on Sally, the checking the guide and the award on the TeachNZ website, you should be able to find the guide for each of the sabbatical or study award types and download it.
I think it's in the chat. I think Karina posted that in the link in the chat.
Yep. So if someone's done extra studies like a master's off your own bat and wish to apply for sabbatical, does that improve the chances? Now, a sabbatical is about the quality of the project and the benefit that we see that giving to your school and the other people that you would share the information with. It might, if you wanted to do further study and take it further into a PhD, it might, you've done part of the PhD work, then that would be beneficial within a study leave, but not a sabbatical. A sabbatical is about the quality of that particular project.
Catherine, yes, it is advantageous to mention that this is part of a journey that you're undertaking. Certainly worthwhile putting in there so that they can see that it's not just a little bit. It's actually you've got a plan.
Right. If somebody needs 2 papers, Rikki, to complete a master's and would like to do 2-term study, is that considered full-time or part-time?
2 papers, if depends on how they run. If you're doing one in semester 1 and one in semester 2, I think that equates to 16 weeks in my head, and that's what it would come to. So it would be part-time over the course of the year, or if you're doing 2 papers at the same time, it'd be full-time for the shorter length of time.
And do they apply for how long they want as part of the application? So that's clear in the application that both papers are happening at the same time, so that
120 credits is full-time. So if you're applying for 60 credits, which is 2 papers, normally that's either full-time for half the year or half-time for the whole year.
Great. Andrew, there's Healthcare Plus offers grants for goods. So if you were looking to do some study, that could be a way to get some money to do that. Right. So if you've already done some papers towards the program, Catherine, that will help you because they are looking for the study awards are about people finishing qualifications.
Yeah. Some people mention their grades, Catherine. For me personally, it was neither here nor there. If a pass is a pass in this situation, to me, it shows that you've got a commitment. It's up to you. It doesn't really make it. There is no criteria that says an A+ will get more than a C.
Right. Anything else kicking around in people's brains? So I guess the key resources we've mentioned are around the TeachNZ website to get the guides, and that's where you log in. Once you have your ASL login, that's you log into the TeachNZ page to get the applications. It's also the Grants for Good to try to get some funding to help you support the learning that you want to do. And those are the big ones. And if you get something curly with a principal or a board, you can contact NZI.
And your one around going upgrade to Q3+ in the Q&A, yes, they are applicable to that because that's completing a qualification, postgrad dip. I can't answer the relieving one. I don't know the answer to that one.
No, the Marie, we're not doing that. We're only doing the TeachNZ college scholarships, which are study leaves and sabbaticals. We're not doing the career changer scholarship. Sorry. We will find out for our anonymous attendee about the relieving on study leave and get back to you. Does the qualification includes levels of Te Reo Māori, as in you've done 1, 2, or 3?
Applied for in the past.
So yes, that is definitely an option, particularly because you've shown commitment to that work prior. In fact, developing people's Te Reo Māori is a priority for the ministry, so it would probably be looked on quite favorably. As long as the rest of the application didn't do anything silly. I guess just while we give people a minute or two to think if they've got any last questions, Rikki. Just want to reiterate that this does require a bit of work prior to putting the application together. Going in and saying, because I know for the sabbatical, there's a section, tell us how you're going to use the 10 weeks. It is not to your advantage to say, I'm going to use the first week to decide what I'm going to do. It is to your advantage to know who the scholars are in the field, or what are the books, what are the websites, what schools in your area are doing interesting things, or what schools outside your area are doing interesting things. You do need to spend a little bit of time, which can be frustrating because there are far more applicants than there are sabbaticals. So that work may not get you a sabbatical this time, but it is absolutely crucial that you've got some idea about what it is, with some specificity about what you're going to do. So the MOE priorities within those guides, as Rikki said, that don't always match what it says on the website. Māori Pacifica children with additional learning needs and low socioeconomic students. So any place that you can show that the work you're going to do is going to benefit those students at your kura is going to be to your advantage. Having said that, don't make stuff up.
Yeah, Luana, in answer to your question around where would you find the purpose of the award, that should be in the preamble in the award pack. Depending on whether it's study or for study award, it's around completing a qualification was the one that sticks in my head the most.
I'm just seeing a few here that are actually quite specific about individual applications, and I think those are probably best to go straight to TeachNZ with. Primary school teacher successful to study the postgrad dip in guidance and counseling. I'm guessing that's a study leave. Play therapy.
Sorry, Barb.
Yeah, so there's a couple questions around people who want to do further study, but that would potentially take them outside of teaching, as in guidance and counseling. How would that be looked on as in a study leave?
They've been applied for in the past, and as we know, the state of our nation at the moment is probably more anxious than it's ever been. So it won't discount you, put it that way. And Christine, to go back to the no, it wasn't Christine's, where was it? Robin, if you apply for first, you have to apply for the study award first, because the papers for uni generally aren't ready to go before the applications close.
So you might need to be a little bit flexible about, well, that one that I wanted to do isn't available this year, but this is a similar one that I can do instead. Yeah. Do all 10 weeks need to be filled with tasks related to sabbatical? No, that is the joy and the pleasure and the wonderful thing of a sabbatical. A sabbatical is meant to be both for your own personal and professional development and refreshment and relaxation. It does, however, need to convince the panel that you're going to spend at least half the time on the learning and professional development part of that. Now, people do that as 2 weeks refreshment, 5 weeks work, 3 weeks refreshment. They do it as working half time for the whole 10 weeks. They do 5 and 5. They do any number of things. They do every second week. However you want to do that, that's fine, but you have to convince the panel that at least half the time, but only 40-hour weeks, so that'll be a win anyway. Half the time will be spent on your sabbatical work. So no, the refreshment part of sabbatical is really important. Can you apply for study leave less than 5 years after having sabbatical? You can apply, but preference will be given to those people who have had neither in the last 5 years. Is it in a sabbatical, is it advantageous to say you're visiting a school rather as well as research into an area? It depends what you're doing. Sometimes visiting a school is the best way to do it. Sometimes what you're interested in can be done as pure research. So that would absolutely depend. Having more time to spend with an elderly mother. For some people that might sort of say, oh, well, you know, gosh, that will be time well spent. For some, it won't matter. At the end of the day, it's the learning you're going to do in the 5 weeks or the 50% of it that's going to be the most important. So just to clarify, with study awards, you cannot have received a TeachNZ study award or a sabbatical in the last 5 years. You know, some people tell us that they're, you know, going to visit family that they haven't seen in 15 years in Europe. It doesn't swing it either way, but it can personalize your information, your application a little bit, makes us feel like we know you a little bit. But it won't make up for, I'm going to spend the first week deciding what books I'm going to read. With the sabbatical, yeah. So just back to that 5 years thing, you can always apply, but preference is given to those who haven't had one. And because they're so competitive, it's effectively, you're probably better to wait another year or two or whatever it is to get you to the 5. Just because it's a ton of work to put an application together. So there is no, back to Deb, there's no advantage to saying only books or only research or only schools or both. It's the quality of the project and whether we think it's going to be, or whether the panel, it's not me, it has been, but it isn't, whether the panel thinks it's going to be of an advantage to you, your school, the students at your school, and anybody else you're sharing with. Can a sabbatical be used to go overseas for Indigenous cultural experience and learning? Yes. I would take care to make the learning part of that seem very strong so that it doesn't look like, how blunt can I be? Pretty blunt. It's got to be stronger than they just want to spend 5 weeks in Hawaii, for example. But if you've got some real grunt and some real study that you want to do that's going to really benefit from seeing how they do bilingual or bicultural teaching on a Native American school or in Samoa or wherever, then absolutely. And again, that's going to be tick those boxes for Maori and Pacifica students that are the ministry priorities. Deb, if you're just going to the islands for your refreshments part, you can say where you're going, it doesn't matter. If you are going and it's part of the learning, you need to make those links really clear. If you're just going if you're going to spend part of the time on holiday, you don't have to.
Yeah, Kate, the overseas conference is a yes, quite simply.
Yeah.
But you need to make sure that you do, though, link that back to the rest of your research and what's likely to happen in your space when you come back. I'd say classroom, but that's not necessarily the same for everybody.
Yeah.
The answer about the BSLA micro credential in the last few years, no, it doesn't. Doesn't stop one applying due to the 5-year limit. We've had people who've had a Wolf Fisher scholarship apply and be successful because it's not one of the ones that is listed that inhibits your application.
So the MIA priorities are, and I may be missing one, but the Māori, Pacifica, students with additional needs, low socioeconomic students, and I believe possibly leadership development in the principals one, but it will be in the guide, so double check, please.
Jan, we have no control of whether you come back to share your findings or not. I know of an NZPF president that wanted to do some research around that, but no, that's you're planning on coming back and life changes. So that can't be a factor in the decision for the panel.
You would still be expected, however, to post your results on the TeachNZ website. However, it would probably not be to your advantage, Jan, to say that you weren't going to come back. That would probably raise some eyebrows on the panel. But as Rikki said, life happens.
Yeah, if you're planning to come back, that's the plan, but
Just hypothetically, naturally, we would think nothing else, Jan. It was obviously a hypothetical question.
It would be a nice note to end on, Barb.
I think it might be. Right. So, hey, team, thanks so much for your, are there reports for the last few years going to be posted? That is a TeachNZ question. They should be posted every year. That is the expectation. But that is TeachNZ jobs to post, not ours. And we have enough going on at NZICDO that we're not going to do TeachNZ's work for them. But it'd be worth flicking an email saying, I was interested, a colleague of mine did a project a few years ago, and I was looking to see it, and hey, it's not there. You could do that. That would be fun. So just want to thank everybody. We know, as current teacher and former principal ourselves, that you are taking time out at a really busy time of the year, if there's such a thing as an unbusy time of the year. All right, so TeachNZ do collect the reports, I'm told, but at the moment they are not being uploaded to a website for others to view. So that's a little annoying because they're interesting. Anyway, thank you all for taking your time to spend an hour with us this afternoon. Thank you for your interest in gaining a study award or sabbatical. It is really heartening to see our profession so keen to progress their own learning and to pursue something that actually is quite a bit of work and with quite a bit of reward too. So if you have any further questions, please do contact TeachNZ. The details are again in the chat. All the best for you as you complete your applications. This has been recorded, and at some point, and I'm not sure when, because it does take a minute or three to it'll be on the website. So if you've forgotten something or missed something, you will be able to go back to it, or on our Facebook page. So we are recording it, and we do wish you all the very best as you go forward with your applications. Ka kite.
So just to reiterate Barb's thanks, yeah, I would never have got my master's without the study leave. So simple as that. So it's well worth doing. It's well worth putting your hat in the ring. Thank you for the time to consider the questions and give yourself, I really do believe you've given yourself a better chance. So we'll just close with the same whakatauki we started
Rikki,
with this morning. All right.
Yeah, I also just wanted to thank our staff in the background
Absolutely.
who've put a lot of work into putting this presentation together, getting everybody registered, and feeding us technical information that we didn't know and making us look good. So thank you to Tracy and Karina in the background.
Right.
And thank you to Rikki.
And to you, Barb. So closing whakatauki, mamua ka kiti a muri, ma muri ka ora a mua. Those who lead give sight to those who follow give life to those who lead. Go well, folks. Have a great rest of the week.
And that's everybody but us.